This is a story I never thought I'd tell. My name is Emma and I'm 40 years old. I've been bringing up my son Liam on my own for a long time. He's 22 years old now. Despite our differences, we've always been close, helping each other through the good times and the bad. After a long day of studying and hard work, Liam expressed his exhaustion and asked if he could lie down on my bed for a while. As our house takes a while to warm up, I covered him with a heavy blanket. At first it seemed like a normal situation, a mother helping her son, but as I lay next to him, I could feel him coming closer. He must have been trying to keep warm, so I didn't think much of it. But to my surprise, he hugged me and pulled me close, just as he had done when he was younger. I decided to let him go, thinking he probably needed comfort. I could feel his steady breathing and warmth next to me. Liam seemed to be drifting off to sleep as we lay there, and the room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I stayed still, not wanting to wake him, trying to convince myself that it was just a mother comforting her son. But after a while he moved closer to me under the covers, and I felt his arm wrap around me a little tighter. I was frozen for a moment, not sure what to do, worried about what I would think. I wanted to say something to distance myself, but another part of me remained motionless. The atmosphere was tense and I couldn't put my finger on why I felt this way. Then, out of the blue, I felt something hard under the covers. It was unexpected and my heart started to race. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that he was just my son and maybe he wouldn't even notice. I lay there, trying to push aside the emotions that were welling up inside me. I told myself that this was just a temporary awkward phase. But as time went on, I realized things were different and I didn't know how to cope. Liam stayed close to me, maintaining a steady breathing rate. I could feel a growing warmth between us, and I wanted to say something playful to ease the tension, but I couldn't find the right words. I felt stuck in the moment, confused by what I was experiencing. Suddenly, Liam tilted his head slightly to meet mine. He remained silent, but there was an unsettling softness in his eyes that made me feel at once at ease and apprehensive. I tried to smile, hoping to dispel the unease, but my attempt only added to the palpable stillness. Liam's hands remained steady and warm on my arm. I could feel his fingertips moving gently, almost involuntarily. It was a tiny thing, but it seemed to light a fire in me with each touch. In the silence, with just the two of us under the covers, my mind raced with thoughts that seemed wrong, but I couldn't shake them. He was my son, but lying so close to him, I felt something deeper, an intimacy I didn't understand. I felt a mixture of confusion and warmth, an unexpected sensation that kept me still. I tried to keep my breathing steady so he wouldn't know my heart was racing. I was at a loss for words and had no idea how to react, so I just lay there, consumed by the strange connection between us. I tried to tell myself it was just a mother trying to comfort her son, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Liam stayed by my side, his hand moving softly, as if he was unaware of my struggle, as if it was second nature to him. His breathing was steady and his eyes were closed. I wondered if he was dozing off, but then I felt a shiver run down my spine, and his eyes fluttered open as if to ask if I was feeling the same strange pull he was. I mumbled his name, barely able to get the word out, wishing I could pull away, create some distance, but I couldn't. The tension between us was like a silent storm, and there was nothing we could say. Instead, the air was heavy with unspoken words, things we both felt but couldn't bring ourselves to say. As he came closer, my heart raced and my mind raced, but I couldn't control the urge to pull away. I was torn between my responsibilities as his mother and the strange emotions that had arisen. My breath caught and all my thoughts vanished, leaving only the intense connection between us. The world seemed to fade away as Liam tentatively placed his hand on my shoulder, his fingers hanging loosely, as if he too was hesitating. For a brief moment, all I could hear was the soothing rhythm of his heartbeat. Hoping to calm myself, I closed my eyes and told myself to break the overwhelming and confusing closeness. But his gentle touch, removing a strand of hair from my face, brought an indescribable pain to my heart. When I opened my eyes, he was staring at me with an unfathomable mixture of trust and gentleness. His face was so close I could make out his freckles, the curve of his mouth, and the vulnerability in his eyes as they met mine. It was as if time had stood still, and we remained motionless in that stillness. My mind raced with questions and doubts, and my body resisted any movement. I felt an overwhelming pull towards this man I had raised, and yet he seemed distant at that moment. Liam seemed to me to be someone else entirely. Just when I thought we would remain motionless in this silence forever, he drew back a little, snapping us out of our reverie. He looked away, almost ashamed, and chuckled nervously, patting himself on the back of the neck. That snapped me out of my daze and back to reality. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. I hoped he hadn't noticed. He murmured, "Sorry, Mum," in a voice full of uncertainty. But I was at a loss for words and had no idea what to say. Surprisingly, for the first time in a long while, I felt uncomfortable in the presence of my own son. In an attempt to alleviate the discomfort, I placed my hand on his shoulder and gave him a small smile, assuring him that everything would be all right. I spoke to Liam in a calm and collected tone, explaining that we'd been together for a long time and that we both probably felt a bit lost. He nodded, and I could see a wave of relief wash over him. Then, just as our relief was beginning to fade, the sound of the doorbell broke the spell we had been under. I stood up, my heart still racing, and gratefully made my way to the door, where I was greeted by our neighbour, Mark. Mark, who had always been there for me when I needed him, smiled, but his eyes lingered on me for longer than usual. I tried to gather my thoughts, hoping he wouldn't pick up on the strange energy I still carried from my moment with Liam. "Hey, Emma," he said, his voice warm. "I thought I'd come and see if you needed anything. I know it's been a bit colder lately, and I can help with any heating problems you're having." I felt a strange wave of relief wash over me, and for a moment I allowed myself to relax. "Oh, thanks, Mark," I replied with a smile. "Actually, the house does get a bit chilly. I'd really appreciate it." I could feel Liam's presence as Mark entered the room, looking down the hall at us, his expressionless face betraying no emotion. I looked back at him, and for a moment I saw a hint of jealousy in his eyes, which he quickly covered up. It took me by surprise and made me wonder if he was hiding more than he was letting on. Mark checked the heater, asked me about my day, and we made small talk. But I couldn't help but keep looking at Liam, who remained silent, watching us both with an unsettling intensity. I could feel his discomfort, and it added an extra layer of tension to the room. I was torn between wanting to make things easier with Mark, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Liam was always there, his eyes fixed on us. Finally, Mark turned to me, and we exchanged warm smiles. "Okay, it looks like everything's okay here. Let me know if you need any more help, Emma," he said as he left. I thanked him, but the tension between Liam and I only increased. I turned to close the door and saw him standing there with his arms crossed and a serious expression on his face. "Are you all right, Liam?" I asked. He shrugged, looked away, and said quietly, "Yeah, I'm fine." I was trying to figure out what was going on in his head when he abruptly walked away without saying a word. As he walked past me to his room, I stood there feeling a strange mixture of relief and disappointment, uncertainty, and a sense of incompleteness. Everything that had happened, the intimacy we had shared, the way his eyes had lingered in Mark's presence, and the strange unspoken tension that seemed ready to burst into words was swirling around in my head. As I stood there staring at Liam's closed door, I couldn't put my finger on it. I retreated to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, going over everything in my head. I knew I couldn't run away from it, but I didn't know how to face it. Suddenly I was startled by a soft knock on the door, and I wondered if Liam had returned. "Please come in," I said, my voice barely audible. Liam, his expressionless face betraying him, unlocked the door and stepped inside. As he sat down beside me, his eyes fixed on his hands, we remained silent for a while, the air thick with the weight of unspoken things. Finally he spoke, his voice barely audible. I don't know how to explain what I'm feeling, Mum. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I squeezed his hand gently as he trailed off, seeming to struggle with his words. I don't know what's going on, and I apologize if I made things seem strange earlier. Liam nodded, his eyes still fixed on his hands before raising them to meet mine. I think we're both feeling a bit lost at the moment. It's been so long with just the two of us, and things can get confusing, he spoke quietly, as if embarrassed to admit it. I couldn't help but notice a mixture of emotions in his eyes. In response, I felt a similar sense of confusion. For a brief moment, I considered hugging him and reassuring him that everything would be all right, but I wasn't sure if that would help or just add unnecessary complexity. So I sat there, allowing the silence to convey our shared feelings. Finally, I took a deep breath and met his gaze. Maybe, Liam, we should both take a moment to breathe and regroup. It's normal to feel close, but sometimes we need a little space to work things out. He nodded slowly, but then, in an unexpected move, he leaned his head on my shoulder like he did when he was younger. It was strange but comforting, familiar and safe, but with an undercurrent of complexity that I couldn't ignore. I felt a softening in my heart as I hugged him, drawing him closer in a way that felt safe, even though I knew our questions weren't fully resolved. For the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe we didn't need all the answers right now. We could take it slow, figure things out together, no matter how complicated. As we sat there, holding each other, I felt a quiet hope that no matter what, we would find a way through this together. We stayed like that, sitting quietly, as if all the confusion could just disappear by being together. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that easy. The warmth between us was comforting yet unsettling, like a feeling just below the surface that neither of us could ignore. After a while, Liam lifted his head and looked at me, his face serious. Mum, I don't know what to do with these feelings. I don't want to make things harder for us, but I can't ignore them either, he said, his words hanging heavy in the air, like a question he was afraid to ask out loud. I swallowed, my mind racing as I searched for the right thing to say. But as I opened my mouth, there was another knock at the door. We both jumped, startled, and looked at each other, caught off guard. The knock was firm, almost urgent, as if whoever was on the other side knew something was going on. Feeling a sudden surge of nervousness, I got up and went to the door. When I opened it, there was a worried Mark again. Hi, Emma. Sorry to bother you. I just thought, I wanted to check if everything was all right. You seemed a bit out of it earlier. I looked back at Liam, who was watching us closely, his face unreadable. I tried to keep my voice calm as I replied, Thanks, Mark, but we're fine, just having a quiet evening. Mark looked at me, then passed me to Liam, his gaze pensive. All right, but remember, I'm just next door if you need anything. After he left, I closed the door and turned back to Liam, who was still watching me with the same intensity. He stood up and walked slowly towards me, and I felt my heart race again, the air between us thick with all that was unspoken. But as he approached me, his demeanor changed, as if he were debating whether or not to press on. Maybe, he whispered, his voice trembling, we need more time. We stood there, close but wary, as if we were on the brink of something we couldn't control, an end, but also a beginning, something we couldn't quite grasp. I nodded, my heart aching with the same conflicting feelings. You're right, Liam. We both need to think things through. Let's not do anything rash. I watched him go into his room, thinking about our future together, unsure of what lay ahead, but hoping we could find clarity in the days to come.